Government in terms of Article 109(5) of the Constitution, as it does not contain provisions of the affected functions and powers of the county government as set out in the fourth schedule of the Constitution. Part 1 of the fourth schedule to the Constitution provides that protection of the environment, as well as protections of animals and wildlife, is a national government function. Thus, the bill will not concern the county government in terms of Article 109(5) of the Constitution. Also, if the statement as whether the bill is a money bill within the meaning of Article 114 of the Constitution, the enactment of this bill shall not occasion an additional expenditure of public funds. Also today, the members of Parliament led by Makali Mulu, the Member of Parliament for Kitui Central, as the Parliamentary Pensions Amendment Bill, Bill number 35 of 2023, which is in its first reading on parliamentary pensions. And the primary principal objective of the bill is to amend the Parliamentary Pension Act Cap 196. It proposes to raise the amount of pension due for former members of Parliament who served between 1st July 1984 and 1st January 2001 to a minimum sum of Kenya shillings 100,000. This is in the light of the fact that despite serving the nation, some former members of Parliament are languishing in poverty, and there is need to take care of their welfare. The changes are also in line to the recommendation of the Akiwumi Tribunal, which was appointed in January 2009 by the Parliamentary Service Commission, PSC, which reviews the terms and conditions of service of members of Parliament and employees of Parliament. The tribunal submitted its report in November 12, 2009, in which one of the recommendations was that the 500 former members of Parliament who served representing people from 1984 to 2001 says that the former members of Parliament should at least be awarded 100,000 shillings paid to the equivalent as pensions from 1st July 2010. The Parliamentary Service Commission adopted the report in June 2010 and resolved that any of the said members who served under that period should be entitled to that payment. Also, Clause 2 of the bill provides for the amendment to Section 8 of the Act to provide that former member of Parliament who, having served in Parliament between 1st July 1984 and 1st January 2001 is entitled to pension, and whose pension amounts not less than to 100,000 and should be entitled to a monthly pension. On whether the statement on delegation of legislative powers and limitation of fundamental rights and freedom. This bill by Makali Mulu, the Member of Parliament for Kitui Central, does not delegate legislative powers, and it does not limit rights and fundamental freedoms in the Bill of Rights. And the statement whether the bill concerns that of county government. This bill does not concern county governments in terms of Article 110(1) of the Constitution, as it does not affect any functions or powers of county governments under the fourth schedule to the Constitution. On the statement of whether the bill is a money bill within the meaning of Article 114 of the Constitution, the enactment of this bill shall occasion an additional expenditure of public funds. Also, Honorable David Gikaria, Member of Parliament, is expected to present his bill in second reading, the bill on the National Construction Authority, the Amendment Bill of the National Assembly, number 59 of 2022. There's also the Public Service Internship Bill of the National Assembly, number 63 of 2022, by Honorable Naisula Lesuda, Member of Parliament for Samburu West. Also, the Public Service on the Values and Principles Amendment Bill of National Assembly number 46 of 2022, brought by Honorable Abdul Dawood, Member of Parliament, which is in second reading, is expected also to be discussed this morning. In the motions, we have the development and implementation of a childcare program for children whose parents are in lawful custody. This is a bill by Honorable Brighton Yegon that it says that where Article 53 of the Constitution provides children, including the right to free and compulsory public education. Further aware that in Section 22 of Persons Deprived of Liberty Act and the Children Care Policy provides for the care of child whose parents is deprived of liberty until the child attains the age of 4 years, recognizing that children above the age of 4 years still require parental support. Further, recognizing that majority of these children often suffer from emotional distress, social stigma, and economic hardship, cognizant of the fact that all children should be accorded a means of maintaining their relationship with their parents, noting that children have restricted economic resources available for their support, in which in turns negatively in their lives. Also, the motion on the national policy on deworming of school-going children by Honorable Mashua Waithaka, the Member of Parliament, and the motion on public health concerns at Langata Cemetery, brought by the Member of Parliament for Langata constituency, Honorable Felix Odiwar, the Member of Parliament, says Article 42 of the Constitution provides for the rights of every person to a clean and healthy environment. Further, aware that Article 69 of the Constitution obligates the state to ensure that sustainable utilization of environment and natural resources, including land, recognizing that the fourth schedule to the Constitution assigns to the national government the functions of land planning, including the general principles of land planning and coordination of planning by the counties, as well as that of matters of health policy. Further, recognizing that there is an ongoing public outcry regarding the neglect of Langata Public Cemetery, which was declared full close to 2 decades ago, a concern that this matter has been left unaddressed and poses a significant threat. The quorum has been achieved, and I hand over to the plenary.
Well, I think we have quorum.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers.
Deputy Majority Leader.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Wednesday, 5th July 2023, in the morning sitting. 1. Annual report of the Commission of Administrative Justice for the financial year 2021-2022 from the Commission on Administrative Justice, Office of the Ombudsman. 2. Reports of the Auditor General and financial statements in respect of the following constituencies for the year ended 30th June 2022 and certificates therein. A. Suna East, Suna West, Kilifi South, Kilifi North, Kitutu Chache South, Baringo South, South Mugirango, Mwingi Central, Kinango, Kabondo Kasipul, Voi, Awendo, Wundanyi, Changamwe, Taveta, Bopasi, Likoni, Bonchari, Karachuonyo, Rabai, Malindi, Ganze, Lungalunga, Kaloleni, Uriri, and Mwatate. 3. Reports of the Auditor General and financial statements in respect of the following institutions for the year ended 30th June 2022 and certificates therein. A. Kisii University, Turkana University College, Kakrao Technical and Vocational College, Riragia Technical and Vocational College, Omuga Technical and Vocational College, Likoni Technical and Vocational College, Siruti Technical and Vocational College, Awendo, Mawego Technical Training Institute, Ahmed Shahame Muidani Technical Training Institute, Godoma Technical Training Institute, Siala Technical Training Institute, Coast Institute of Technology, Information and Communication Technology Authority, Kenya Ports Authority, and the Human Resource Management Professional Examination Board. I thank you, Honorable Speaker, and I beg to lay.
Order number 6, notices of motion. Order number 7, questions and statements.
Honorable Member for Laisamis.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to ask that, being a member of Parliament for Laisamis constituency, I asked the independent electoral...
Kindly use the mic next to you. That's not clear enough.
Okay.
To your right, yes.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I'd like to ask question number 087-2023. I'd like to ask the question direct to Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Could the Commission, 1, provide a report on the last review or exercise undertaken, if any, on constituency or county boundaries markings undertakings by the Commission in the country? 2, provide details of the size in square kilometers of Laisamis constituency and clarify whether the size has ever been varied over time. 3, provide details of the actual global positioning system, GPS, coordinates of the boundaries of the constituency in the north, south, east, and west, as well as those of each of constituencies bordering Laisamis constituency. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay, I've received a request from Honorable David Gikaria, Chair for Environment Committee, and I think requesting that a member for Kajiado North, Onesphorus Ngoyo, you give the question on his behalf.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On behalf of the member for Nakuru Town East, David Gikaria, to ask a question to the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. Could the Commission, 1, state when it is intending to carry out the exercise of reviewing of constituencies and wards boundaries as stipulated in the Constitution? 2, elaborate on the criteria the Commission plans to employ so as to guarantee fair boundary review process. 3, provide details of the protected constituencies and how the Commission will ensure that the boundaries review process does not interfere with the same. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honorable Member for Narok North, Honorable Agnes Pareño.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity and to ask this question. And my question is, could the Commission explain why Narok North constituency has not been gazetted as a hardship area despite satisfying the conditions to be disgraded as such? 2, enumerated efforts that have been instituted to ensure teachers deployed in the constituency benefit from the hardship allowances. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Member for Butula. I think he's not present. We can move to the next order.
Order number 8, the Wildlife Conservation and Management Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 3 of 2023. First reading. A bill for an act of Parliament to amend the Wildlife Conservation and Management Act 2013.
Next order.
Order number 9, the Parliamentary Pensions Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 5 of 2023, first reading. A bill for an act of Parliament to amend the Parliamentary Pensions Act and for connected purposes.
Next order.
Order number 10, the Public Service Commission Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 6 of 2023, first reading. A bill for an act of Parliament to amend the Public Service Commission Act.
Next order.
Order number 11, the Crops Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 8 of 2023, first reading. A bill for an act of Parliament to amend the Crops Act.
Next order.
Order number 12, the National Government Coordination Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 25 of 2023, first reading. A bill for an act of Parliament to amend the National Government Coordination Act.
Next order.
Order number 13, motion. Development of a policy and funding for junior secondary schools.
I think we had a balance of 2 hours, 50 minutes. So we'll resume debate. I'm informed that Honorable Shakil had a balance of 5 minutes, but he's not here. I think we can proceed. Members who want to contribute, press the intervention button. Okay. Member for Kadiani, Honorable Robert Ngui.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity. Madam Speaker, I stand to support this motion by the Honorable Ruku because, Madam Speaker, this is really an important issue. Madam Speaker, education is critically important because even from our forefathers when we gained independence, one of the pillars that they were hell-bent on ensuring that they sought out was the issue of fighting ignorance, which is basically providing the population of this country with education. And over the years, Kenyans have proven to be extremely good in academic matters because if you go all over the world, you find, excuse me, the best scholars are actually Kenyan. And that means basically we have the right people, we have the right breed for purposes education. But Madam Speaker, the government of the Republic of Kenya over the years has continuously, constantly bungled the matters of education. And Madam Speaker, I'm saying this because one of the things that you notice that over the years, systems of education keep changing. And you know, many times you cannot even get a clear-cut reason apparently for why the changes are occurring. I remember when I was young, there was systems that had existed before where the education system was such that there would be an exam, I think at standard 3 or grade 3 then, called intermediary, then there would be other exams going forward. I went through a system where we had seven years of primary, 4 of secondary, 2 of A-level, and 3 at the university. Afterwards, there is the one that they call the 844 system, which is now being scrapped for the new CBC. But Madam Speaker, you notice, every time we have these kind of changes, there's investments that are made that sometimes go to waste. If you go to our rural areas, most of our primary schools have got a classroom that existed that was called a workshop that was earlier used for pre-technical subjects, art and music and art and crafts, and now they are defunct, they're not being used. So a new system comes in, and we are supposed to now look for laboratories, look for extra classes. So, Madam Speaker, I think we need to be very careful to ensure that whatever system we come up with, we can live with it for a long time. If you go to the developed world, they don't keep changing the education system every 5 or 10 years or after every major election. We must come up with a policy in education that will last for time immemorial. so that if we are going to introduce any changes, they are minor, not major changes that will leave some of our facilities without being used. Madam Speaker, now the new system has reintroduced subjects like art, music, pre-technical, and these subjects require new facilities. The facilities that were not used for many years had already become, voided, and some of them had even been brought down. So, Madam Speaker, it's important that the government does a good job. I want to support the idea of the new education system. I think it's a brilliant idea. The CBC education system is very clear, and it's actually emulating some of the developed countries. But, Madam Speaker, as we emulate that, we must ensure that we do proper planning. And planning for education means that we deal with the issue of curriculum, the issue of staffing, and the issue of funding. Madam Speaker, that is where I feel that as a government, as a country, we have failed. Now, CBC started in 2015 with the PP1. 8 years later, we have never put in place plans for ensuring that we have enough classes, we have enough labs. We have not ensured that the teachers that are going to teach this system have been trained, because even now, what we are churning out of our education, our teacher training institutions, is still the training that is for 844. So it's really, really unfortunate. And Madam Speaker, what happened is that the government, in its knee-jerk responses, decided that we will train the teachers that will be teaching CBC. And the teachers that were taken for this training, which was just basically, in service training for like a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, was generally for the teachers that were teaching lower primary schools. And Madam Speaker, what if the research shows that those teachers that were teaching lower primary schools are mostly the mature lady teachers, female teachers in our rural areas. And when they were taken for training, when they came back, they refused to teach that system and passed it on to the younger generation and told them it is you who can do this training. Unfortunately, that training actually went to waste. And so you find that many of the teachers that are involved, up to now, they don't understand the system. Now, JSS, Madam Speaker, is JSS is a very good concept. But Madam Speaker, there is a very major mess in the manner in which the JSS has been introduced. First, you remember, we were told that the junior secondary schools would be in secondary. And so every secondary school in Kenya was facilitated to put up a classroom. Madam Speaker, those classes up to now, we have very many questions about them because the funding was totally inadequate, and some of them are like a half of a classroom size. But they were built in secondary schools. Later on, another policy comes where we are supposed to do these schools, or rather these schools are supposed to be domiciled now in the primary section. And then there was a decision of which primary schools are the ones that will be allowed to host JSS. Madam Speaker, in my constituency, it is a shame that my top-performing primary school was not qualified to be able to accommodate JSS. And then the children that were there in grade 6, when they went to grade 7, they were taken to some of the worst-performing schools. And that is really demoralizing to the parents. So, Madam Speaker, I believe that this motion it speaks to the heart of the problem that we are facing, and that, Madam Speaker, what we require as a government now is to ensure that the policy is put in place and the facilities are put in place so that every child can be able to continue learning from where they started in primary, finish grade 6, go to grade 7, 8, and 9 within their primary schools, and finish so that they can go to secondary schools. Madam Speaker, it is possible because already every primary school has up to grade 8. So all they require is one extra class, and that is in another year and a half. And after that, they require one lab. I am certain that even from the money that we get under CDF and with a little bit of support from the Ministry of Education, we can be able to make this dream come true. So I want to support, and I want to say that the honorable member thought through properly, and this is something that is worth emulating. That is why the people of Mbeere North have the right leader. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honorable Dorothy Kiara.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to support this very important motion, and I want to thank the member for Mbeere, Honorable Roko, for bringing up this very, very important item for discussion in this House. Honorable Speaker, the Constitution recognizes education for all children as a basic right, and the government of Kenya is no exceptional, that it is mandated to provide free compulsory education to all students. Honorable Speaker, developing of a policy and funding for junior secondary school is a key component of this very important program that the government has embarked on, because competence-based curriculum is a curriculum that we want to say as a country it must succeed. Honorable Speaker, it is very disheartening for us to go around the schools as it stands today when we realize that these schools are poorly equipped. I am so glad, Honorable Speaker, because I know as at this point in time, the constituencies have gotten their constituency development fund, and I know key in the agenda is going back to the constituencies and continuing with building of classroom infrastructure in those schools. However, I want to acknowledge the fact that all these schools that we are going to build, some of them are in very deplorable condition. And Honorable Speaker, if these students who are transiting from primary school to junior secondary school have to have their esteem, we must ensure that the classrooms are up to the standard of a junior secondary school and the laboratories are properly and well equipped. Honorable Speaker, it is also important to note that the distances, some of the distances that these children are covering are quite huge distances, and therefore I want to implore upon the Ministry of Education to ensure that each and every school has a JSS class. Based on this, Honorable Speaker, the classrooms cannot go without teachers. Teachers also are a key component to this, and I want to sort of disagree with the member who is saying the teachers who are trained to take care of JSS are these old teachers who are picked from primary school class 1. Honorable Speaker, I want to disagree because every trained teacher is deployed, and the Teacher Service Commission is very sure that the teacher who is deployed in a certain school will be able to handle that particular class. A teacher might be old, Honorable Speaker, but the brain is not old. So the teachers, whether they are in whatever age, as long as they are posted to teach in those schools, they are competent and qualified enough to handle those classes. What we are calling for, Honorable Speaker, it is equal distribution of these teachers so that in some schools we don't have classes or students sitting in class without teachers of certain disciplines. Honorable Speaker, item. The managers of these schools, the head teachers and the principals, they are crying because capitation is never availed on time. Honorable Speaker, this is a serious setback on the education standards of our children because our school managers are torn in between the policy that the Ministry of Education has given and the stern warning that they keep giving teachers that don't send any student out of class. Honorable Speaker, I want the Ministry of Education to stand up and be counted because teachers cannot be given students without food, without anything, without books. And yet, every day there are warnings that teachers should not send students out of school. Honorable Speaker, we are in a time where even the parents are going through a very difficult moment. We know this country is grappling with the issues of money, Honorable Speaker, and we don't want to see situations where students are sent back to their parents. Honorable Speaker, I want to support this very important motion because the only way we can be able to handle, the only way we can be able to add this government accountable is ensuring that we develop a policy and funding for this junior secondary school so that it succeeds. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I support Honorable Roko and I say kudos because this motion is not only touching on Bere, it is touching on the entire Kenya. Thank you, Honorable Madam Speaker.
Honorable Member for Baringo North, Honorable Joseph Makila.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support this motion on development of our policy and funding framework for our junior secondary schools. Madam Speaker, having been a teacher for many years, there is need and it is proper as per this motion to ensure that the junior secondary schools curriculum and organization be anchored in law in the Education Act 2012 by actually amending to capture the spirit of the junior secondary schools. Madam Speaker, we have a curriculum for junior secondary schools that has not been properly developed because at the moment, Madam Speaker, in all our schools throughout the Republic of Kenya, there are one teacher against 13 subjects. And what has been happening is a local arrangement between the primary school teachers who are in that school and that teacher that was employed to actually cover up the syllabus in hook and crook to ensure that learners are actually engaged. But in real sense, Madam Speaker, and having passed a budget that included funds to employ more teachers for JSS classrooms, it is therefore evident that there is need to concretize the junior secondary schools in all our primary schools throughout the Republic of Kenya. Madam Speaker, you will realize that from next year, primary will run all the way to class 6. So we have extra 2 classrooms per school, those who have been up to standard 8. It means there is need to increase an extra classroom in every primary school to ensure that once the students reach grade 9, they have a space in all our primary schools throughout the Republic of Kenya to capture the 3 classrooms for JSS, because that will be the highest level of JSS is at grade 9. So we need them we need to increase the funding. Madam Speaker, the CDF that we have that are in our constituencies, it's not enough to actually fund all the primary schools at once. There is need to rationalize resources and direct more resources to increase an extra class in our primary schools. Madam Speaker, there was an attempt which was not properly done. And this is why I agree with Ruku that this is the earliest thing is to be done now. There was a plan, they built one classroom in every secondary school, which never materialized. It hung in the air. So there is need now, as this one graduates this year to JSS 2 or 8, there is need to plan ahead of time so that whenever they reach grade 9, there is a space for them. Madam Speaker, there is also need, and this country should listen, is that the report should finally be released because it's not only about JSS. The presidential working part on reform of education should finally unveil their official report so that the children of Kenyans are not, and the teachers are not working on casework. Madam Speaker, what has been happening now is for those teachers who are P1, they are now being asked to go for a refresher course in teacher colleges to be able to actually teach CBC curriculum. Madam Speaker, that is good, but there is also need to take the secondary school teachers who are supposed to handle the junior secondary schools for another refresher course to be able to handle the CBC curriculum now revert at that level as junior secondary schools. So that, remember, the teachers that are handling these students now were only trained in 2 subjects. As per the, those who went for diploma and those who have gone degree, they were only trained in 2 subjects. And yet, we have a curriculum that has about 14 subjects. Madam Speaker, I agree that now proper guideline of the development of the curriculum, the regulations, the guidelines, so that the children of Kenya do not operate on a trial and error learning process. These are our children, and we want them to have competence as envisaged by this law, by this new curriculum. The CBC is meant that when you graduate from junior secondary, there is what is called pathways. Those who will go for the STEM, the science and technology, engineering and maths, it's called STEM. And those who will pursue career in arts and sports. So at that pathways, the students that graduate at grade 9 must be knowledgeable enough to be able to choose which path they will be able to take to pursue their education. Madam Speaker, the earlier the better, and this is why I support this, because we want at a level of exceeding of grade 9, people who are knowledgeable enough to pursue various places and education. But as well, there is also something not very clear. What about these established high schools? The Alliance of this world, the Mangus of this world, the Kapsabet of this world. We need to equip those schools to become the senior secondary schools where students now will exceed to go to those schools so that they don't become village high schools and national schools. Because the consequence of that is every high school in that community will take their own, and that will not bring nationalism and cohesion. We need a curriculum that brings together the children of Kenya so that they will be able to study and pursue their education in such a manner that will bring unity and appreciate the diversity of the people of Kenya. Madam Speaker, the junior secondary schools now in our primary schools, we keep them a budget for capitation. Madam Speaker, there should be a proper management of the junior secondary schools apart from the primary schools. This is the only way they will be able to appreciate that if there is a BOM, for example, for the primary, then there should be a separate management entity for the junior secondary schools. And one thing that is puzzling is, will these junior secondary schools operate under a different head teacher, or they will be under the same head teacher of a primary school? These are things that these guidelines must be able to sort out, so that we have a different management because they have a different curriculum. So that the BOM of primary deals with primary matters, and the head teacher of primary will deal with the primary curriculum. And then we have a head teacher that will be responsible for the JSS, because after all, it moves from grade 7, 8, and 9. That's good enough. Those are good number of students to be handled and ran by a principal of their own and a board of their own, so that they will be able to pursue their learning. We also want to make this thing to be affordable to Kenyans. The CBC, the JSS curriculum must be affordable to parents of Kenya and must be accessible to the young. If you look at, I went to my local primary school called Torokwonin. I looked at grade 7. They are very young people. They are not able to track, travel for long distance to attend their JSS classrooms. Therefore, if we have agreed as a nation that it must be domiciled in primary, then every primary school in Kenya must be able to host JSS classrooms in their schools. Mr. Speaker, this motion should be seen to move from being a motion to a bill. Honorable Ruku, we must fast track this as we pass this motion, turn it to become a bill, so that we have an amend the Act of Education Act 2012 to now bring in the new order in our education system. With those many remarks, I support the implementation of this particular motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Have you? Oh, sorry.
That's your chance to speak.
Sorry, I didn't hear that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also stand to support this motion by my friend, Honorable Ruku. And it is very interesting, Mr. Speaker, the mover of the motion is asking us to urgently develop a comprehensive secondary school policy on JSS. And secondly, to develop a clear implementation framework. And I was having a chat, Mr. Speaker, with my good friend, Dr. Nyekal, whose idea I quickly borrowed, that actually while we support Honorable Ruku, it must be noticed here that actually we are doing something which we ought to have done long ago. Because, you know, as he says himself, and if I borrow his words, how do you have visitors come to your house and then you start preparing for them? I mean, we should have prepared this thing long, long ago. But now that we didn't do it, I think it is very good that we start this implementation. When I look at this house, Mr. Speaker, I see two categories of people. I see people like myself who went to 7 years of secondary school, 7 years of primary school, 4 years of secondary, 2 years of high school, and 3 years of university. And Mr. Speaker, that is the same education that the people in the United Kingdom who gave us the education go through. Those are the ones that the neighboring Uganda go through. But, and I think myself, I always look at myself and I say, I'm very well educated. If I can just add another master's, I'll be like everybody else who is going to school nowadays. Then somewhere, the education changed, and I can see the second category here, the one that went through 844. When 844 was founded, it was based on the policy that we require practical, something that students can take home. So workshops were built, and a lot of other things, adjustments were made. And so majority of the members of parliament here, I believe, went through 844. Now, Mr. Speaker, for no apparent reason at all, we have CBC. And I think myself, and I don't know whether this would be outrageous, but I think it is time we put our education policy, our education system in the Constitution so that it does not change like the weather. Another government will come. We in Kenya are very, very good at something called benchmarking. Sometimes one of you might go to Papua New Guinea and see something good there, and you come and tell the whole country, we are changing like Papua New Guinea. I think there must be a stop to overhauling. We can change some things in the education system, but we cannot just overhaul our education system every day, put it upside down. One day, 844, another day, CBC, another day. I think that we should put a stop to this. But having said that, Mr. Speaker, this is the reality. The Kenya Kwanza government says that this thing was started by the Jubilee government. I personally never see a difference, because when you look at it clearly, the last government that this parliament had was the Jubilee government. And most of them sat in cabinet. But whatever the case, they have inherited a system which we now must live with. And when I look at it myself, I say, we now have primary school ending in standard 6, I think, or they call grade 6. The current one that we are going through is still on, going through to 7 and 8. The policy should develop and say, after that, grade 9, what is going to happen in grade 9? So we have to prepare and look ahead so that we don't again get kids getting to grade 9 who have come from JSS and we don't know what is going to happen to them. Now here is a question of teachers. Now I had a gracious lady here say, no, it doesn't matter whether they are old teachers or not, but these people have told us that this is a new system of education. Who are the experts for delivering this system of education? I think we must get the teacher training to be then customer fitted, should be good for purpose. We should therefore now train teachers for purposes of going to CBC, to train them. And we also need to adjust ourselves. And this is the question I think Honorable Maklapo or somebody has asked. Are these people, are these children in secondary school or they are in high school? First, they are too young to be in secondary school. But we have called them secondary school students, and we have made them think like secondary school students. We have to create a certain adjustment so that as soon as possible, we shift these kids to secondary school so that they don't be called junior secondary when in fact they are senior primary. There are many, many gaps in this education system that need to be addressed. I have not gone to textbook center of late, but which are the books that are now going to be used to teach these students? Have we prepared enough materials for training our students in JSS? We have a lot of issues that need to go into this policy. And I really want to congratulate my friend, Honorable Ruku, for thinking about it. Because unless we go through all these things, we do not have a good education system. And then lastly, I just want to say that the position of CDF is acknowledged in this matter. I know that the ministry sends capitation. Personally, I think the ministry must develop a way of monitoring how capitation works. Because the teachers are receiving capitation, but when you go to them, they say, Mheshimiwa, utusaidie kununua desk, tusaidie kununua hii. Who, where, what exactly is capitation being used for? The CDF money that has been sent to constituencies has done a lot in this 1 year. Does capitation also do development? Can we be able to have a good explanation of how it works? Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to support.
Members, you should be looking at your mics. If you ask to speak, the reason the mics are there is so that you're able to see them and speak. The Honorable Madenge.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I stand to support the motion by Honorable Ruku on the policy on JSS. It is important, Honorable Speaker, that this country starts to take the education of our children much more seriously than is happening today. Honorable Speaker, what we find is that despite the CBC program having started literally 7 years ago, when it was time for junior secondary, we started learning around helter-skelter like a country that did not know that this date was coming. And even now, with the patchwork that allowed us to commence JSS in the primary schools, you find that we have again gone back and we are sitting on our laurels, not knowing what will happen by the time the next 2 years are over and it's time for our kids to join senior secondary. More importantly, is that nobody in this country, including the mandarins at the Ministry of Education, can give a clear, coherent roadmap on exactly what we are doing at junior secondary. And it is important, Honorable Speaker, that we do not fail our children. We've been speaking of a lost generation that has disappeared into alcohol and drug abuse. we are preparing at this pace another lost generation that is pursuing JSS unless we can put our acts together. Honorable Speaker, a lot of the JSS children, despite the hardships that are there, have not even been able to coherently and consistently attend school because the new JSS came with a new set of uniforms, new requirements for desks and chairs and books that parents had not been prepared for. And therefore it is important that this motion is taken very, very seriously by this House and the ministry in terms of restoring order in our education system. Honorable Speaker, the current grading system at Form 4, Kenya Certificate of Secondary Education, is producing a wasted number of our young people in this country. Because when we analyze the KCSE performance, we find that barely 20% of our Form 4 students may attain the minimum university entrance grade. After that, another 28% attain the diploma college's admission grade. And therefore, we have about 15% of our school leavers at Form 4 competing for certificate and craft courses. And Honorable Speaker, the tragedy of this country is when we find that even a voluntary service like NYS requires our graduates to have a D plane at Form 4. What are we telling our young people in this country as legislators and leaders in terms of the plan we have for their future? And no wonder we have a crop of very many young girls and boys who are literally present in every shopping center in this country, saying they have nothing to do except indulge in cheap liquor and alcohol, that as a country and as a leadership, we have failed to curtail its production and distribution. We are poisoning our young people as we watch, as traders have taken our country hostage because they want to make money at any cost. The formulation of a coherent policy, clear and well understood by not only our students but also our parents, will give a clear roadmap for the desires of our young people. The sending home of our children in secondary schools has to stop as a policy in this country. The cost of uniforms varies from school to school. Why should there be a difference between the cost of uniform in secondary schools? The cost of the feeding program for lunch varies from school to school, even schools that are neighboring in the same town. If you go to Nyeri Town constituency, a school known as DEB and a school known as Temple Road Primary, both of them, literally neighbors, have a different cost for lunch. And you find that the biggest burden today that parents of children in our schools are having is the cost of school feeding. And therefore, this policy must also begin to address the issues of the cost of feeding in our schools and also the cost of uniforms, as well as the cost of the construction of multipurpose halls, which have become a darling for all schools today, the funding of school buses, and therefore we need a clear government policy on the cost of some of these burdens that are being borne by our parents, largely jeopardizing the education and the future of our children. Honorable Speaker, SDG 4 requires us to ensure that our education is inclusive, equitable, and of the same quality. And therefore, the question that begs us as legislators is the quality of education offered at Kahumo High School in Nyeri Town constituency, same as the quality of education offered at Kehuyo Secondary School in my rural village. It is clear in our minds that the answer is no. then how can we be signatories to the SDGs? And then, as leaders, we sit and allow this kind of disparities to continue. When we come to the management of teachers, in Nyeri Town constituency, which is largely a municipality, it was a municipality even before the new constitution came into place. I have teachers who are paid the enhanced house allowance for teachers working in municipalities, and another teachers in the same school, in neighboring schools, who are not being paid the enhanced house allowance. When you approach the management of teachers in the Teacher Service Commission, they want to pretend that they are not aware that these disparities are existing. And Honorable Speaker, it is time that some of these institutions that are managing the affairs, the important affairs of the country, like the Teachers Service Commission, should be invited in this House to answer questions from legislators. The question of the ministers coming in to answer for constitutional commissions and other bodies that are playing crucial roles in the affairs of our country should come to an end. For how long can we keep shielding these people while the problems keep piling? Honorable Speaker, what exam will the JSS...
Honorable Madenge, you probably know that under the rules we changed, the independent commissions answer questions at the committee level. Like all the commissions in this country are supposed to take their questions to the relevant committees.
Honorable Speaker, I am well guided. However, if all of us have an interest in when the Teacher Service Commission is appearing before the 15 members of the Education Committee, I am sure if this was opened for us as friends of the committee, the members here would overwhelm the membership of the committee. And that is a weakness sometimes in our system that we need to be alive to and get to address. Honorable Speaker, in ending, what exam will the junior secondary students sit at the end of their 3 years? And how is that exam going to impact their advancement into senior secondary? Honorable Speaker, I support this motion. And Honorable Oku, this could not have come at a better time. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. Member for Sirisia.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for giving me a chance also to contribute on this important motion. Honorable Speaker, education is the key of everything all over the world. And Honorable Speaker, I want to thank the member who has brought this very important motion for discussion. I rise to support this motion, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, when I speak about CPC, Honorable Speaker, I think our constitution sometimes lapses because it has not been anchored very well in the constitution, Honorable Speaker, because every minister who is appointed, especially in the Ministry of Education, he wants to make changes on his or her own decision as he or she feels. Right when you check from 844, even from during Moi's time, Honorable Speaker, there have been many changes on this curriculum every time. And this has affected our children. This has affected our parents. Like now we say that education in Kenya is free primary education. But CPC has made it more expensive to the parents than before. So you can say that there's no free primary education in Kenya, Honorable Speaker, just because the Principal Secretary visited another country and copied from there, and he made sure that it works in Kenya. It is working either, but it's not working very well, Honorable Speaker. And that is why members, every member has his or her own thinking negatively about the CPC. There are no teachers, like where we come from, in the rural constituencies where we come from. There are no teachers. If indeed they wanted a change, could change in the curriculum, Honorable Speaker, we cannot come up with the junior secondary school and again it remain domicile in the primary school. And with only one teacher, either with the 8 students, that means that the ministry was not ready, the DSC was not ready to post the teachers to teach that the new class that has been promoted from primary, and then it remains again there with no teachers. So the government must do something. One, to remove school fees, paying a lot of money, and again the practicals which they do, Honorable Speaker. They send children to bring chicken to school, to slaughter for practicals. If it is a class has 100 children, it means they are taking 100 chicken to school, Honorable Speaker, for slaughter, to make teachers feel fat, enjoy eating chicken from parents. Honorable Speaker, I want members to dig in properly about this CPC to see actually if it is helping us as a country, in the education sector or not. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I support.
The Honorable Waluke just decided that the open order was not necessary. So, members, I wish to recognize the presence of pupils from Eno Matasiani Primary School of Kajiado North in Kajiado County, and pupils from Vidhu Ramji Secondary School from Kiharu in Murang'a County. We welcome them to the National Assembly to follow our proceedings today. This chance now goes to Honorable Kagushia of Mukurweini. It's not in the House. It goes then to Honorable Majimbo Kalasinga of Kabuchai. Huh? The Honorable Kagushia, is he around? The Honorable Kagushia, you can't be doing that. Just give him the mic.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to appreciate, and I promise that I will take the shortest time possible. Honorable Speaker, I stand to support the motion by Honorable Ruku on the funding of, or development of a policy on funding of JSS in this Republic of Kenya. Honorable Speaker, I have, first of all, looked at a very quick glance of how JSS has been conducted in Mukurweini constituency. And I've seen that out of 66 schools, public schools that exist in Mukurweini constituency, I've seen that we have about 18 schools that are not being funded as JSS. And of course that makes me worried, because I understand that whenever a school has a JSS program, it receives an excess of the normal capitation that are going to schools with a substantial amount of money. And that in essence means that all the schools that are not having JSS in the primary schools that we had before are no longer receiving that capitation. For example, picked out like a school like Wanjide Primary, Matuto Primary, Mukoi Primary, Washe Primary, Kirongi Primary, Gashirero Primary, Ningaine, Kiawaita, Matiraine, Mutowade, Wangera, Ngora, Mwati, Itito, Gakera, Wahari, Wanguro, and Gakima primary schools are not having JSS. And Honorable Speaker, that is why I strongly stand to support the motion that we come up with a better arrangement on how we are going to fund these JSS schools or the primary schools that we had, so that our students can stop traveling long distances to access very basic education in other areas. I, for example, had parents from schools like Wanjide who have come to my office and really complaining because their students are walking a long distance to access education. Honorable Speaker, I appreciate that a bit of staffing is being done. I've looked at the newspapers today, and I've seen that TSC has advertised for about 20,000 positions of teachers in JSS primary schools, and I've seen the advert, and I really want to encourage our people to apply for those applications, for those job opportunities. But Honorable Speaker, this being the case, we still have a challenge because the 20,000 is adding to what we had before, and I'm not very sure that this is going to be, completing the cycle of staffing in all our schools. You realize that most of the JSS primary schools, we are having the teachers taking on subjects that they not train in college. You, for example, have someone taking chemistry or biology, yet they had trained in literature or English. And of course, that is lowering the quality of education in our JSS schools. So, Honorable Speaker, I strongly want to support that we come up with a policy where we are going to systematically and strategically support and fund the JSS secondary schools. Honorable Speaker, finally, I also want to note that the government has increased, and this parliament has passed a budget that has increased the amount of funding for JSS from 15 billion Kenya shillings to 25 billion Kenya shillings. That is a whopping increase of 10 billion Kenya shillings, which is a good thing, which we must commend. But can we then have a policy by the ministry, together with TSC, which is going to properly guide how this funding is going to be implemented in schools, so that we are able to balance between the staffing, the infrastructure, and we are able to also look at the primary schools that did not receive the JSS, because basically we are simply killing those primary schools that are now up to class 6 or grade 6. Honorable Speaker, I please beg to support this motion and congratulate my honorable member Roko for having brought this useful motion to this assembly. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Presume it is me. See you go up.
Member for Seme, proceed with your contribution.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this.
Just order. I've seen everyone look at me. I've given 8 this side, 7 this side, without a single member from this side since we started this debate. Not one.
And I was the earliest this side.
So just relax. Just relax. It's
okay.
to ensure that we are a house that has minority and majority. So it's my duty to ensure that both sides speak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When you look at orphans well, you get blessed. Now, I rise to support this motion, and I really must appreciate and congratulate Honorable Ruku. There are times that we put aside politics and look at the welfare of the nation, and this is one such time. Mr. Speaker, if you look at what Honorable Ruku is asking us, that we need to set a policy, guidelines, and implementation framework for a project where pupils are already in class. How far can you be with putting a cart before a horse? It is even shameful that we are talking about that and the children are already in class. If you are still talking of policy, guidelines, implementation framework, do we even have an implementation timeline? How these kids will move? Honorable members here were saying, proposing how kids should move and where classes are. These are things that should have been in the books before we started. Because this is planning. This is making things work. This is not impressing people. There's a difference. If you are looking for votes, yes, well, it would work. But if we want to educate our children, we must go the way Honorable Ruku is proposing, and it should have happened earlier. What do we have an infrastructure needs? Do we know? We had classrooms built in secondary schools. The kids are now in primary schools. I know there's transition, but even that I'll raise issues about. What about the human resource? We are saying here that some old people, you know, were picked, some old teachers. It does not matter. They were trained. But do we know their needs? What about the financial needs? How were schools picked to house JSS? In my constituency, a large number, nearly half, actually do not have JSS. And if you picked this, how were the number of pupils identified for planning financial needs? When I asked, I was told they looked at the number of kids in standard 6, or who are now moving to 7 to start junior secondary. But now when you have amalgamated them, this is not the same number of kids because you have put kids from other places. How was that one? How, I really ask my colleagues, how can that happen? You mean nobody sat down to do simple arithmetic? Because that should have been done. And even then, the money is not coming regularly. We can understand that. Mr. Speaker, we can talk that there was a transition, that there was another government and the government and change. In fact, if there is a transition, Mr. Speaker, the duty is on the incoming person to make sure that you take up in a way. The country will not listen to you blaming those who have gone. They have gone. If you find their errors, your duty is now to correct those errors. So this transition should have been extremely meticulous. We were planning to take kids in secondary schools. We decided in one day we are going to primary. At that point, meticulous planning was needed. It is clear to everybody now that that was not done. And this is just one example, actually, in the whole ministry, where policies are not properly formulated. We have had very major changes in this ministry. We have the competency based with the JSS. We have 100% transition. How do we now link and coordinate 100% transition with JS? What is the transition point now? What is the transition point now? Before we knew, it was standard 8 to Form 1. Now, we have junior secondary. So where is the transition point? Where is the 100%? We have just come from the issue of delocalization and relocalization. How do you harmonize that with JSS? How do you harmonize that with the 100% transition? The main purpose of competence-based is that the kids should have practical skills. In the infrastructure planning, school classrooms, we seem to be okay, we can be okay, because CDF had put out a lot of classrooms in my constituencies. All the JSS classrooms are in classrooms that we built in primary schools for those schools. Now they're being used in a way in a very good way, they're being used to house JSSS. So again, his Honorable Ruku's idea that how we use CDF is welcome. But if it is competence-based, there are two issues in infrastructure that I don't hear about. Are we going to have laboratories or are we going to have workshops? When those are chicken that the Honorable Member was talking about, are they going to be slaughtered in a workshop, or are they going to, the ones that are slaughtered, the ones that will be eaten, I know where they'll be slaughtered. That's not a problem. But the ones that are for teaching, will they be slaughtered in a laboratory, or are they going to be, well, if it's a laboratory, it will be called dissection. Will they be dissected in a laboratory? They will be dissected in a workshop. In the kitchen. Or if it is fish. Okay, now, gentlemen, we can laugh, but these are very serious issues. Are we going to put up, if you want them to have skills in agriculture, if you want them to have skills in creating artifacts, that will need workshops. Some of us went to primary schools when there were workshops. I don't hear about workshops. How many workshops? How many laboratories? When do you transition from laboratory to workshop? Because they do different things. When is the streaming going to happen? Because when you have streamed, then you know who will need workshops and you will know who will need laboratories. Where are these issues being discussed? So, Mr. Speaker, we have put the cart before the horse, and we must go back, as Honorable Ruku has indicated, and do the planning. If actually we meant well, I think this government was in a position to actually slow down the process and say, we are not satisfied with the planning, we slow this down for a year, and then we will plan it properly. I think the country would have accepted that. We must reach a point where we are not driven by politics. I know 2027 is coming, but let me tell you, it is the good work that will take us there, not the impression that we create. Impressions will fizzle out. The real work will come. So let's go back and do this, even if you are doing it late. It is better late than never. Let's go and look at our kids. Mr. Speaker, I support this. And we are saying urges. I think we need to remove that word urges. We should resolve. We should amend to resolve. Urges means they may or may not, but we want them to do. And if you have to put it into an act of parliament, Honorable Ruku, go ahead on this one, we'll support you. Not like when I always oppose you in TV discussions. That's politics. But now it is about our children. We'll support it. Bring the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Nyikal. The member for Kabuchai.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I think Honorable Ruku, Member of Parliament from Mbeere North, has done a very good job. We have a lot of issues that this bill will address, Mr. Speaker. We want it to address several issues. And Mr. Speaker, if we have to go even back and see, if we have to address the confusion that was placed last year, Mr. Speaker, when even CBC classes were built in secondary schools. Not only that, Mr. Speaker, even the contractors who did this job, up to date as I speak, Mr. Speaker, have not been paid. The contractors, Mr. Speaker, are being auctioned. They did a job for government, they were never paid, and I don't know when they will pay this, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if you look at this one, public primary schools, Mr. Speaker, cannot afford the expense aspect of these JSS. Mr. Speaker, yesterday, I was speaking to my daughter, who said that in their school they require 8,000 for home science. To me, as a member of parliament, it's no problem, Mr. Speaker. But what of that child of a border in a Kitumba primary school, where he cannot manage that amount? Mr. Speaker, as Honorable Nyikala said, I want now to agree in totality that this program was started before the policy. I wish Honorable Ruku was there before CBC was put in place. Thank you very much, Honorable Ruku, for thinking ahead, though late, but with this policy, we can change things for the betterment of our nation. This is the time where we are bringing heads together. Last week, Mr. Speaker, I was at home. We were having secondary schools, games and sports. Mr. Speaker, there is a confusion. Junior secondary schools, students cannot play in secondary school games. Neither can they compete in primary schools. Mr. Speaker, they are standing between. If they play in secondary school games, the junior ones mock them. You are supposed to be in second. We must place the right things first. I was wondering, Mr. Speaker, but now that it has come here for address, let us give this thing first priority. As I support this, Mr. Speaker, let us give it the first priority. Also, let's look at some schools that cannot manage. If this JSS was expensive enough and government had not planned for it, it would have waited. It would have looked first for money. Mr. Speaker, if you come and see some of the facilities, we have very good private schools, Mr. Speaker. Private schools have the best laboratories, they have good libraries, and Mr. Speaker, they are getting a due advantage ahead of the public schools. What are we going to do? Mr. Speaker, if you tell us that they will be sitting for exams during grade 9, what are we putting in place so that these exams reflect a transition that is proper from now junior secondary to senior secondary? If I were asked before, Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't have named the junior secondary. I would have named the senior primary. Because when it is senior primary, Mr. Speaker, the teachers in primary schools will be comfortable to teach. You know very well, Mr. Speaker, that teachers are given guidelines. The policy does not allow a primary school teacher to teach in a secondary school. But as I talk today in Sikusi Primary School and Namilama, Mr. Speaker, teachers handling junior secondary schools are only 2 or 1, handling 18 subjects, Mr. Speaker. What did we do? Honorable Ruku has brought well this so that we discuss properly. We iron out things that we don't have and do it in good faith and put these things ahead so that should we move out of this thing, move out together and do it things properly, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I speak here, when I was looking for votes in Kabuchai constituency, we were saying that the moment we take over this office, we shall remove CBC because it was expensive. Parents were not managing. But now, even with the more expensive life, Mr. Speaker, we need the government to totally take over the expense aspect, so that parents cannot be missed, some students cannot miss classes because of this, Mr. Speaker. So, Speaker, all along, I've moved around here, and how I wish that the people of Mbere who elected Honorable Ruku repeat again and elect him again, Mr. Speaker. Thank you as I support this for the correct of this nation, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Kiri. Give me the mic. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me apologize first because somebody picked it.
The Honorable Kiri was way ahead of you on this list. He just doesn't have a card. And
somebody picked my card and my phone. It's very unfortunate that I think as members, we need to respect one another when you meet.
Honorable Kiri, go on to your debate.
Yes. Mr. Speaker, I want to dwell on what curricula CBC means. It has 7 core competencies, because I think that's where we're having a problem. The first is communication and collaboration. The second is critical thinking and problem solving. The third is creativity and imagination. The fifth is citizenship, digital literacy, learning to learn. Mr. Speaker, fellow members, we have a system that has recognized the core competencies, but implementing so that these core competencies can be achieved by every kid is not in place. Mr. Speaker, I want to support the mover of the motion, my very good friend Loku, my neighbor, that it's the high time that we put the polity first and suspend the implementation of this program. Mr. Speaker, we are talking about increasing competency in terms of creativity and innovation. But Mr. Speaker, you realize that the environment that we have put our kids is not conducive for creativity. Mr. Speaker, we haven't put the element of digital literacy because we have no laboratories, we have no computers, etc., etc. Mr. Speaker, we have no facilities to encourage the learner to learn more. Why? Because we lack the basic infrastructure. For example, I see demonstration on swimming in many schools. Surely, this is learning to learn. Swimming on sand, swimming on concrete, and yet we are saying we are impacting competencies to our children. I think we are condemning our children than making them become good citizens. What I know, the only thing that this CBC promote is singing and dancing and the national anthem. There's nothing else that I see. Mr. Speaker, these schools lack infrastructure. These schools lack textbooks.
Honorable Meli, what's out of order?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, is it in order for Honorable Ruku, Honorable Ndikiri to really mislead the House that the only thing the kids are doing in CBC, yet he had actually outlined very well about the qualities and the competencies of the CBC, critical thinking and all the rest.
Meli, what I was listening to you.
He's out of order because he's misleading the House.
Order, Honorable Meli. Yes. What he has said is that the only thing he sees are those ones.
But what
so you can't claim to be seeing for him.
but he's actually misleading the House, Honorable.
Mr. Speaker, it's very unfortunate for the chairman of education not to be attentive and to be hearing things from his own corners. Very unfortunate, because you are the one who is supposed to be solving these problems. Now it has been brought by Mr. Roko. Please accept to be told where you have failed. Mr. Speaker, we have no textbooks. How are we going to impact good knowledge about competencies on learning how to learn? Mr. Speaker, this program was lashed. Why? Because the curriculum was not well thought of. The only thing they have come up with, yes, the core competencies. But now, Mr. Speaker, if we lack classrooms, workshops, playing grounds, what are we going to impact to our children? Mr. Speaker, the expenditure for the CBC, as determined, is supposed to be 15,000 per kid. Mr. Speaker, this has not been distributed to the schools. It hasn't been distributed in the schools. In actual fact, the release of money is late, meaning that even the impacting of knowledge is going to be delayed. Mr. Speaker, this system does not create opportunity for people with special needs. And this is one of the failures of education in this country. We have so many people with special needs out there who are failed by 844, who are failed by the older system. And even this new system, these people with special needs are not being catered for in terms of provision of facilities. So, Mr. Speaker, something is seriously wrong. The management of the CBC is we are condemning our parents. Many of them are very poor. We are telling them to provide equipment that the government is supposed to be providing. In actual fact, at the end of the day, you are going to find that parents are the ones that are going to be providing more than the government. 15,000 shillings per kid is not enough, it's not adequate. So you find the burden is going to be borne by the poor parents. Mr. Speaker, I find this system not working. It's not going to work. It's going to benefit a few who are going through the private institutions. Otherwise, we are going to continue creating disparities. Mr. Speaker, let's take, for example, my constituency has 87 primary schools. Out of those 87, 17 have been condemned that they cannot host junior secondary. Why? Because they are told they are less than 35. These children are forced to walk for 10 kilometers away from their school, meaning the government in its policy has become discriminative, because you can imagine a kid walking for 10 kilometers, just because the school does not have 35 pupils in the school. So, Mr. Speaker, I support the activity. I support the motion that has been brought up by Mr. Luku, and say this: it is time. Education is the only thing that is going to bring everybody together, equality. But with this system, I doubt whether it is going to do. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The member for Kitui South.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity so that I may also support this extremely important motion brought by the Honorable Ruku. And I would like to first of all congratulate the Honorable Ruku, Honorable Speaker. Having sat in this House for the last 10 years, I have seen him come with very important motions and also prepare himself to support extremely important bills in this House. So I would like to encourage him to continue. Mr. Speaker, as I start supporting this motion, I would like to start with numbers. Honorable Speaker, the issue of JSS is extremely a matter that has to be discussed in this House. I have a total of 275 primary schools. Honorable Speaker, that tells you that I have over 300 schools in my constituency. I know that people are shocked because there are members of Parliament who have 4, who have 10 primary schools, others who have 20. We have people seated in this House, members of Parliament who are taking care of more than 300 schools, and I'm one of them. And Honorable Speaker, out of the 275 schools, 100 primary schools have been condemned that they cannot host a junior secondary school. Mr. Speaker, this already discriminates the children of Kitui South because they are children who are walking through valleys, going up hills, going to look for a place where several schools have been put together, and now they are the ones who are being seen as the JSS. First of all, Honorable Speaker, I want to agree with the Chair for Education, the Honorable Meli, that truly CBC is not bad. Because, Honorable Speaker, this world is led by people who can communicate. CBC is training children to be communicators, to be able to collaborate, to be able to be critical thinkers, to be imaginative, to be creative, to be courageous, to be able to be good citizens, to be able to be digitally literal, or rather digital literacy. And Honorable Speaker, I would like them even to add financial literacy, because this world is led by people who can do all these competencies that are being advocated for by CBC. And I would like to say that one of the lead communicators, Honorable Speaker, as you know, is the Honorable William Samoei Ruto, lead communicator, and that is why he leads this country. So, Mr. Speaker, going back to this matter raised by the Honorable Ruku, is that the Ministry of Education must give us a proper linkage between the Education Act of 2012, the Basic Education Act of 2012, link it properly to all the other amendments that have been done within education laws, and link it up properly with the CBC. And this will give our children an opportunity to know that every JSS that they are in is being led and run as any other. A JSS in a primary school like my rural constituency of Kitui South, which has Motomo and Ekoda sub-counties, then will be led like as JSS in Nairobi City. That is where we'll have equality in education. Honorable Speaker, as you know, if we give them a clean book, then the administrators who are going to be in this JSS are going to put their own notes, and we are going to have schools which are not clearly very well led. Honorable Speaker, as members of Parliament, we have put a lot of money in managing our schools, both primary schools and also JSS. It is important that when we put money in the JSS, that the money is put in good use. Mr. Speaker, I am calling upon the Ministry of Education and our former colleague who is there, the Honorable Machogu, that he must say that if there is a primary school, then there must be a junior secondary school. That is the way that we'll get an opportunity for all our children to be trained properly, to be able to go to schools within their villages, to be able to have the 100% 100% joining secondary school as they move from primary school, and that is what I look forward to. Mr. Speaker, when I was campaigning, I told my constituents of Kitui South, in Ekoda and Motomo sub-counties, that there will be a secondary school in every primary school. I have a problem explaining to them why 100 primary schools in Kitui South do not have JSS. So as I support this motion, Honorable Speaker, I would like to thank the Honorable Ruku and call upon the ministry to tell this House whether it is money that they need so as funds can be appropriated so that we can have junior secondary schools. Honorable Speaker, our teachers are being taken back to our counties. And I have realized that Kitui South has lost many teachers who have gone back to their nice counties. And I am calling upon the ministry that also all teachers who are from our county, who are in those other counties, who have requested to go back to Kitui County, they should be given this opportunity, because this is the government that saw that teachers had been punished and sent away from their counties. So now that the Kenya Kwanza government has made a decision that every teacher must go back to their counties, especially the one who choose to, those who have applied for transfers, Honorable Speaker, I am calling upon the ministry to allow them to go back, the Teacher Service Commission, to allow them to go back to our constituencies so that our junior secondary schools can have teachers who are willing and who are ready to be in a place where there may be no electricity or where there may be no water. Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to support this extremely important motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Larry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to also add up my voice to this very important motion. And I'll start by congratulating my colleague, Honorable Ruku. This is something that is being talked about in every other part of this country. And I will start by saying that the CBC system of education is a very good idea, where children will go to school, and from as early as 5, 6, 7 years, you are able to start picking out the talent of each and every child and developing the same, because that would make it easier for children as they grow up and become adults to be able to fit in areas where they'll be able to qualify and be able to give quality kind of work to this country. Mr. Speaker, the JSS, the junior secondary schools, was started in a hurry. It was actually rushed because the ministry, or the government for that matter, had started by putting up classes in secondary schools, meaning that they wanted the junior secondary to be domiciled in our secondary schools. They were not able to do that in every other secondary school, meaning that there was actually going to be a gap. Currently, what the current administration did is to put the JSS back into our primary schools, where probably I would say we had more facilities, because as children were moving out, there were classes that were going to be were previously being used by standard 7 and 8, which were going to be empty, and probably that made some sense. But unfortunately, what we have seen in our areas, and this is one of the challenges, is that not all the schools were able to be given the junior secondary schools. In my area, we have schools like Mbawine, Ngesho Primary, Kagwe Primary, and several others, where children are being forced now to walk long distances to go to schools where the junior secondaries have been domiciled. My thinking would be that, as Honorable Roko has put it, that we need to develop a policy on the JSS, or the junior secondary schools for that matter. Most of the schools, you find that they have only 2 teachers. And as my colleagues have said, you'll find that these are teachers who are trained in particular subjects, and not like the primary school teachers who would probably be able to teach several subjects. Meaning that the children in JSS are missing out, and as they continue now learning in class 7 and going into class 8, I'm sure the syllabus or the curriculum for that matter is not being properly covered. In my own thinking, Mr. Speaker, if we as a parliament and the government were to sit and come up with a proper policy, I would think of a one-stop shop where we come up with a kind of a complex, where we start now with the junior primary schools, the JSS, and the secondary schools in one complex. Because even now, where we have been able to put now the JSS in the primary schools, there are a lot of facilities that are missing. We don't have laboratories, meaning that if they want to do anything practical, they will have to look for the secondary schools where they are. Supposing now where they have the junior secondary school, there is no secondary school nearby. It means that these children are not being able to be taught properly. Mr. Speaker, if we had one complex, it would mean that the facilities that are being used by the senior secondary schools will still be able to be used by the junior secondary schools. And the transition would be easy because the students would be within one particular complex. I also find that the implementation of the JSS on the issue of funding is also a problem to our parents. One, they started by changing the uniforms. Then you find that through CBC, for children to be able to do whatever work they're doing in the classes, there are a lot of aids that are required. They're supposed to buy so many items, and this is becoming a burden to the parents. Mr. Speaker, I would say that as we come up with the policy and the issue of funding, one, there is the issue of the capitation. Within the capitation, the government should ensure that there is money for every child to be able to cater for all the aids, as they have been doing before, where they're providing through capitation money for buying textbooks and all that. Then they should also provide money where whatever aid is required in the learning, there is money provided by the government. The issue of the teachers, we have said we have only 2 teachers, where the students are not being taught all the subjects. As much as we have seen, there are adverts now that they are going to employ more teachers. As Honorable Nikal was said, we have put the cart before the horse. That means we started something that we were not ready for. And Mr. Speaker, as I come to a conclusion, because of the lack of facilities in our schools, because our parents are not able to afford the kind of money that is required to buy the various aids that are required in the schools, I would say that we, as Honorable Roko is suggesting, we come up with a proper policy on the provision of teachers and the aids and whatever else is required, and also the issue of funding in our JSS is something that needs to be put within the Education Act, so that we do not have issues of children being unable to learn properly in our schools. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Nambale. Yes, Honorable Mutunga.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, this is a motion that everyone has an interest in. And I believe everyone would like to express themselves and to be seen to express themselves by their constituents. Honourable Speaker, if we let everyone speak for 10 minutes, we will not go half of this House. And since we regulate our own timings, I would like to propose that we regulate our timing to 3 minutes, not 5. 3 minutes.
Thank you, Honourable
So that
Mutunga.
people can just give us the impact points on our speaker.
Yes.
Thank you.
Honourable Mutunga, I would have wished so too. In fact, 2 members have approached me about it here. And Honourable Mutunga, who has been in Parliament now second term, should know the rules. Yeah. That even me, I would wish that members, and we've done this sometimes before, members, that where there's a motion that has so much interest, and you didn't move a motion to reduce time at the beginning, it is upon you, if you wish, to speak for 3-4 minutes. So I would wish going forward, as I leave, that members speaking should speak for 3-4 minutes to enable other members to speak. Otherwise, we failed at the beginning to regulate time, so you cannot stop a member from speaking for 10 minutes. That's how it works. So in future, I think it's good for us to know that it's a motion, and even the move of the motion, you can always advise that this will have so much interest, then you can regulate time. I'm already taking so much of your time. Honourable Member for Nampale, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to support this motion. Mr. Speaker, as a nation, there was a clamor for change of our education system from 844 to the CBC system. But now, what baffles me is that the Ministry for Education did not put in place policies for smooth transition from 844 to the CBC system, because junior secondary is under the CBC system. But when we go to their constituencies, we find that this junior secondary has so many challenges. One of the challenges, the issue of infrastructure. Second, we have the issue of teachers. And the question that comes is that the Constitution under Article 53 provides that every child has a right to basic education. But now, in fact, the right must, the basic education must be free and compulsory. But the question is, when you go to the constituencies, you note that the junior secondary students are being asked to pay some levies in terms of fees. Many parents, I'm sure they have knocked the doors of many members of Parliament here, seeking support for school fees to pay for these students. So the question that we ask ourselves is this junior secondary education free as envisaged under Article 53 of our Constitution? Are we transiting well when moving from the 844 system to CBC, whereby we have junior secondary, but it appears like the ministry did not prepare well because there are no laboratories, no teachers. Some schools, even in Nambale constituents, we find like Mwenge Primary, we have only 2 teachers, and Igara Primary, we have 2 teachers handling the junior secondary education. So the question is, has the ministry put in place proper policies and mechanism to ensure that our children achieve this right that is enshrined under Article 53 of the Constitution? So I wish to thank Honorable Ruku for coming up with this particular motion that is very, very important in support of the rights of our children. So, Madam Speaker, for junior secondary school in Nambale constituency, we have so many challenges that we urge the Ministry of Education to come up with a proper policy and finances to ensure that as members of Parliament construct these laboratories and other classrooms for the junior secondary, the ministry should also top up the funds to ensure that we have enough laboratories, we have enough teaching materials, and also enough teachers so that the children can realize their dream. The other question that we ask ourselves is that we say that basic education is free. The question that follows, is the JSSC a basic education, or is it a secondary education? So these are the gaps that are missing, so that we need, as members of parliament, to ensure that we fix. And through the motion that has been brought by Honorable Ruku, as proposed by a colleague earlier, we need to ensure that this particular motion is transformed into a bill, so that we come up with the proper policies to support our children. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much. Honorable members, I would like to recognize students seated at the Speaker's Gallery this morning from Morao Secondary School, Kipkelion constituency in Kericho County. You are welcome to the National Assembly so that you may observe proceedings of the House. And I would like to call upon the Honorable Member for Kipkelion West. You may proceed. Please give the member for Kipkelion West the mic.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And to begin with, let me use this opportunity to welcome the students from my constituency who are visiting on a tour of Nairobi and Parliament to learn, Madam Speaker, about what happens in this House, because they are the leaders of tomorrow. And Mr. Speaker, the subject matter of today is about the CBC. And Madam Speaker, I wish to support motion by the Honorable Member for Mbeere North, Honorable Ruku, that, Madam Speaker, these junior secondary schools were a good idea. Madam Speaker, the intention of the people who formulated this competency-based curriculum was to allow learners to train in their areas of expertise. Madam Speaker, we went to a school in the 844 system where you do CRE even if you are good at sciences, and you are forced to do every other subject, even which you don't seem to pick, Madam Speaker. And therefore, this competency-based curriculum is a modern curriculum to prepare this country for the future in the Vision 2030 and to achieve progress into a modern and changing world. And Madam Speaker, I want to begin by supporting what all members have spoken before have said. This thing was rushed. A lot of things that should have gone into the preparation did not go as was needed, Madam Speaker. And therefore, I want to urge that, first of all, these junior secondary schools must be, the government and the Ministry of Education must make them fully free. We don't want parents to be charged for junior secondary schools. Madam Speaker, number two, every primary school in the Republic of Kenya must, as a matter of policy, have a junior secondary school where the parents were not able to meet the demands to make them junior secondary schools. Madam Speaker, the ministry should pick up and support such institutions financially, so that by the end of this financial year, or by the time we are opening the schools in the other term, all primary schools in the Republic of Kenya have junior secondary schools, Madam Speaker. Number two, or the third point I wish to make, the teachers must be prepared through training, continuous training, to be able to prepare these children to identify their talents, so that as they move further, they are redirected to the areas of their expertise. Those who want to do engineering are sent to engineering school. Those who want to do music, Madam Speaker, are sent to music schools. And those who want to be architects and in areas of their specialization, Madam Speaker, must be aided to achieve their dreams. And another thing, Madam Speaker, when the Kenya Kwanza government took office, it was a campaign promise that teachers who had been delocalized, Madam Speaker, and who wish to go back to their home counties and constituencies were, after the administration was set up, be allowed to go back to where they want to go and teach. Madam Speaker, we have a lot of teachers still pending requests with the TSC to go back to their home counties and their home constituencies. The Minister for Education must direct the TSC, Madam Speaker, to immediately finalize the complete transfer of everyone who has requested to go back to their home constituencies and to help the children of their home constituencies, even in this competency-based curriculum, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the other issues are the issues of facilities and the teachers. Even as the TSC advertises the 20,000 teachers, it is still a drop in the ocean. And Madam Speaker, we don't know what we are going to do with the current cohort that is already in JSC, because they are not prepared at all to meet the demands of this changing world and the demands of choosing a career going forward. So, Madam Speaker, I wish to thank the Honorable Roko for bringing this motion, and Madam Speaker, to say that this one must be translated into action and acted upon immediately. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Much member for Kipkelion West. Honorable members, this motion has a lot of interest. The screen is actually full. And at 11:53, I'll be calling upon the mover to reply. And you know that we cannot change the number of minutes that you speak at this moment. It was not done at the beginning of the motion. So you may choose to speak for less minutes, then it means that within the remaining time, more of you are going to speak. So I'll give then an opportunity to my left, and that will go to the member for Lugari.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to start by appreciating my colleague Ruku for pulling a fast on this. Madam Speaker, whereas many of my colleagues have hushed the House, asking that the motion, the implementation of CBC was rushed, I'll take a completely different view. Inertia and failure by government machinery does not amount to more time for people to implement a policy. Up to where we are today, we have done well over 8 years into CBC. By now, we should have learned the ropes of what we need. What is ailing CBC and implementation of JSS? Rightfully so, Madam Speaker, the lack of policy and clear framework on what needs to be done, by whom and when. It appears that every day the executive is taken by surprise. We've not put enough into the planning of this very well, if implemented, system that will change the life of our nation. Madam Speaker, it is true that even in my constituency, a number of schools were left out. And when I looked at the tool that was being used, it was a very subjective tool. It actually depended on the people who visited the school. And eventually, almost all my schools have been put back. What was shocking to me, a school that has even up to class 8, they will not approve it to have JSS simply because they think the amount of land is not enough. And it has up to class 8. So I asked, what does a JSS classroom require? If I've been having up to class 8, and you cannot allow the same school to run a JSS class. Madam Speaker, my proposal is basic, that all primary schools must have JSS. Madam Speaker, for many years in this country, we have lived a lie. And if we are not careful to correct the mistakes of the past, education is going to be only for the rich. And I see an opportunity, Madam Speaker, in the JSS, an opportunity that will equalize all of us into having the same kind of education. Why do I say this? The decision to host junior secondary in primary is one step towards equalization. Madam Speaker, we know that in this country, because of categorization of schools, some schools have been given, actually oversupplied by resources. Some schools receive millions of shillings in support, while others that require get nothing. Some schools in this country, because of categorization, they have oversupply of teachers. Whereas some schools are understaffed. Some don't even have TSC teachers, and yet they are registered schools. Madam Speaker, having every primary school have JSS is one way of creating equity by not having special schools, national schools, extra-county schools, sub-county schools, and county schools. Madam Speaker, one of the major issues in this country about planning of education is the people at Treasury developing a model of funding without talking to the stakeholders, without talking to educationists. I'm proposing that as we go forward with Honorable Ruku's motion, we must include a funding model that takes into consideration the views of the stakeholders of education. Why am I saying this? Madam Speaker, you are aware that no primary school has a laboratory. You are aware that in this country we have made a decision that we are going to have a resource center at that level. Madam Speaker, the only tested model in providing infrastructure for school that works is the one that has been done by NGCDF. The Ministry of Education, through this policy, must have a working model with NGCDF so that it gives NGCDF a conditional grant to develop resource centers. Madam Speaker, 35,000 classrooms of JSS, they have averagely one teacher each. I want to urge this House that we resolve that we provide a funding line for JSS as a project. Why am I saying this? Madam Speaker, we know that if we were still to lump all the money under basic education, when it comes to division, the decision remains with the person who has the pass. But if we provide a budget line for JSS, then the money will go into ensuring that JSS succeeds. Finally, Madam Speaker, I want to propose, as we look at this, that as members of this House, we start thinking on how to make education affordable. And Madam Speaker, I'm proposing that we must resolve as a House that is it the time we need to go to school. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank
I
you.
support the motion.
Thank you. The Honorable Phyllis Bato, member for Moiben.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute on this motion on policy framework for the JSS curriculum or JSS system of education. Madam Speaker, a lot has been said and done in this JSS program. I believe it was the intention of the educationists in this country to bring a system of education which is going to bring meaningful reforms and meaningful development in Kenya. Madam Speaker, competence-based curriculum was supposed to help the learners to be able to perform what they have been taught or what they have acquired in the classrooms. For example, Madam Speaker, a colleague has just said prior that students were told to be bringing chicken to school to go and slaughter. Madam Speaker, you can agree with me that some of the children of these generations had lost some basics on the way. For example, slaughtering chicken is something which is supposed to be known by any child. I mean, basic things. Some, for example, don't even know how to milk cows, especially those who stay in the rural areas, like myself. Those are the things which we used to practice at the very early stages of life. So many of these children don't know basic things. And that is why I think the initiation of the CBC was to make us relearn basic things which are supposed to be helping us to live, to be practicable members of society. Madam Speaker, what I think essentially is lacking in the implementation of this curriculum is dissemination of information. Dissemination of information, Madam Speaker, in the sense that there is so much which has been written down. There is so much information which is just within some very specific people, but down to the level of the teacher and the student, there is a vacuum. So what should be streamlined is how the information is transmitted from the ministry, from the TSC, from the schools to the parent and to the child. Madam Speaker, in my constituency, Moiben, some days back, parents and the community were up in arms because they were saying that there is only one teacher who was posted to teach 14 subjects in a school. When essentially, this teacher who is posted to that school to teach the JSS class is supposed to be like a coordinator, and the head teacher to reassign the other teachers who are domiciled in the school, the other subjects to teach in the same class. It was not that this teacher who was sent was going to sit there and teach up to 14 subjects, chemistry, physical science, arts, language, and etc. Because, Madam Speaker, we have the best trained teachers in Kenya. Our system of education is one of the best here in Kenya, Africa, and internationally. That is why the students who we send out of Kenya to go and study, for example, for postgraduate or even undergraduate, they are normally rated to be the best, and they don't drop out of school. Not like other countries where, from Africa, when they send their students to some universities abroad, they are subjected to examinations, other forms of exam to determine whether they qualify to proceed with their studies or not. But fortunately in Kenya, we have the best. So what should happen is that as much as our colleague is talking about the policy, I think there is so much here and there. What we need is issues to be streamlined so that the curriculum is very clear how it is going to be implemented all the way. The funding, currently from the budget which we've just passed, you realize that the education sector is getting the bulk of the share in as far as the money which was distributed is concerned. So how I wish this money which is going into the education sector be utilized to do the right thing, and it should be distributed equally. Right now, for example, in my constituency, the capitation for the JSS has been sent, but you'll find that there are some schools who have not received the funding. For example, a school, GK Makeresa Primary, they have not received any money. The students are in school. So equitable or equity in education, where do we get equity? If this money is released in piecemeals and to other students, others first, others later, that is when equality or equity is lost from the beginning. And that is how other students, other areas start getting marginalized. We normally say education is an equalizer. And if it is an equalizer, there should be equity from the beginning to the end. How I wish even the ministry, the money which the ministry normally uses to develop infrastructure in schools, why can't they take the entire amount of this money to NGCDF, where the implementation will be done fairly? Because that is where equity will be felt. Otherwise, if we have the ministry deciding where the money to be taken, by who, or who makes the most noise, or decide who is a friend of who, it becomes problematic. How I wish we could take all this amount to NGCDF, and proper development is going to be felt. Just like now, what the work the office of the NGCDF has done in our schools in Kenya. If you go to every school, you will see a classroom, a building, a dormitory by NGCDF. That shows that it is a success story. Why can't we follow the same and put more money so that the infrastructure in the schools can develop, and that way we are not going to have issues of inequality. Another issue is this business of putting hierarchies in schools. We have extra county, national. We should do away with such and have Kenyan schools where, whichever they are, whether they are in Mandera, whether they is wherever, we should have Kenyan schools, uniformity, so that if it is Alliance, it is Alliance Secondary School. If it is a school in Moiben, for example, Kapkei School, it is Kapkei School, so that our children will start feeling that they are equal, so that when I am putting on uniform of a school in Moiben, another one in Alliance, it is the same, or possibly we could have similar uniforms, so that it is just like the buses. All the buses are yellow, all our uniforms should be the same. The only difference between a student should be the admission number or the index number. That is when we will start thinking about uniformity. So what we should be doing is that we should be supporting this system of education and putting more resources and seeing where things are not working. Otherwise, destroying it or saying it will not be a success, it is like throwing away the baby and the bathwater. But what we should be looking at is seeing, streamlining it and making it a success story. A system cannot just, we can never have a time when we are saying, we are very ready now, let's change the curriculum. It has to be done systematically. Thank you, Madam Speaker. My time is up.
Thank you very much. The Honorable Charles Ngusia, member for Mwingi West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to add my voice on this. And because of the interest of time, I will take only 2 minutes. First, congratulations to my colleague, Ruku, for bringing up this motion. Madam Speaker, we all agree that this education sector has really been run with so many individual ideas without lacking proper consultation of stakeholders. For the last 5 years, when I've been in Parliament, we have seen the issues of 100% transition. There's delocalization, then CBC, then JSS. All these issues taking place in just shortest time possible. And Madam Speaker, we all agree that the right idea can actually be a wrong idea if it is not done at the right time, Madam Speaker. I am here to support this motion, and how I wish the honorable member was elected 10 years ago, actually to come up with this proper policy. Coming from our constituency, which is already marginalized in terms of everything, Madam Speaker, we have witnessed this implementation of the JSS system being done in a manner that is not really comforting to our parents. If you look at the number of schools which have been selected to have this JSS, we leave so many without considering the distance our pupils and students are traveling from one school to another. And I am thinking this issue of JSS needs to be actually revised and have it domiciled in all primary schools so that we can shorten the distance our students are facing. Madam Speaker, most of the schools in our country, not even in my constituency alone, lacks proper infrastructure to implement this thing. Some of the schools even don't have laboratories. Some of the schools don't even have adequate teachers. Even the teachers we recruited recently, they have not really been trained to perform this curriculum-based thing, Madam Speaker. I am calling upon, again, we go back to the drawing board, the way honorable members suggested, to come up with proper structured policy to implement this issue. And I could have actually spoken more time, taken more time, but due to the interest of time, Madam Speaker, let me support and urge the honorable member actually to move further and make sure these issues is proposed and are properly implemented by education sector. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much. The last opportunity on this motion will be the member for Mhaya, the Honorable Omboko Milemba.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I'll be very brief also. One, let me begin by congratulating the teachers of Kenya who are toiling with the CBC and junior secondary school with no facilities, and kind of nobody now remembers them and imagines that everything happening in the schools is because of them, while the truth is that there's no money going to schools, and therefore they are unable to get the equipment that they need to use to teach the children of this country. And the real matter lies with the fact that all we need in our schools is funding. The teachers have no problem. In fact, many speakers are speaking about how many chicken are being sent to school, but they forget that sometimes they also invite cow dung to be taken along by the students to schools. Number one, Honorable Speaker, the education system must change with time. And indeed, the system we had for A-level cannot be the one that is working today. The system of 844 has outlived its time because it's a factory manufacturing many students who cannot get employment, and it's theoretical. So the need for change is true and is a reality which you cannot run away. Honorable Speaker, I therefore ask the House that we must embrace the new system of CBC because that's the modern way to go in the education system. Despite the many challenges it has, it is the correct way to go because it will build skills, it will build technologies, information, and how a person can carry himself around in the society without depending on white-collar employment. But then it has got its challenges. Honorable Speaker, I would wish to say that what we envisaged in the CBC is that every school should be having a full school. What you are calling basic education must begin from ECD to primary to junior secondary and even what we are calling secondary. That will be a standard school, Honorable Speaker, that should be equal in the whole country. We are envisaging that this will enable the government fund schools equally so that the funding of a rural primary and the funding of Mangu is the same, and the provision of education at those levels is actually the same. And that's how education will be an equalizer. I would want to ask this Parliament to actually support CBC because this is what will bring money and development to your small schools and grow them to the level of alliance. There's a danger ahead which I must point out, and that's why Ruku is right. The ministry imagines that the 2 years that the students are in the junior secondary is too long. But let me caution that 1 year is already gone. In the next year, the children who are in the junior secondary must be leaving the junior secondary to another pathways. Yet there's no policy and pathway of how they will operate. So again, when we finish the next year, we shall be in a crisis of how they'll enter the schooling. It is very important that a policy be made quickly, whereby all the three pathways, and there are three, one of them is called STEM. The STEM one is the science and the one that teaches theory and science and technology. The other one is arts and performing arts. The other one is social sciences. A policy must be made quickly so that by next year, we know that all schools also have these three pathways so that all schools are equal and they are moving at the same level. Honorable Speaker, as I finish, we must start thinking extraordinary. Remove this kasumba we have in ourselves of boarding schools. The boarding schools must quickly die, and we have standard schools that are equal for every area, every student, and every region. Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this chance.
Thank you very much, Honorable Omboko. Honorable members, you know this is a house of rules, and one of the rules concerns time. So now I call upon the mover to reply. For the honorable members who have expressed interest, several of you, we are going to rely on the magnanimity of the mover. Honorable Ruku.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I request, Madam Speaker, to donate a few minutes, each member 1 minute. I donate 1 minute to Honorable Kasungu, Honorable Stroya, Honorable Emesa, Teso South, Honorable Ndeko, Honorable Victor Mandazi, Honorable Double N, Honorable John Makari, Honorable Daniel Wangwa of Wabuya, and we have only 10 minutes. And Honorable Bensouda, 1 minute each. Then, Madam Speaker, I remain with 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to follow the order. I will start with the Honorable Ameso.